Hey, I'm Coach T, and this is another book review video. So, in the last two, I did the Python crash course, and then I did the C Sharp Player's Guide. I had to look at it carefully because I always get the title wrong. In this one, I'm going to do Unity in Action, which is by Manning Press. So, one cool thing right off the bat is if you buy a copy of this book from Manning and you buy it, I think new, or you get lucky like I did with a used copy, they will allow you to redeem a free PDF license to you from their website. So if you're an iPad reader, which I've become an iPad reader over the last year or so, I have my paper copy of this, but I have my licensed PDF copy of it as well that I actually prefer to work off of because I can carry that around with me along with all of my other books. This one, it's getting a little bit beat up from riding around in my bag for a couple of months. So, Unity in Action. This is the third edition by Joseph Hocking, and this is it's another not quite intermediate guide for players, or not for players. Sorry, for programmers. So, like in R.B. Whitaker's book, where he really doesn't do the fundamentals of programming. Although Whitaker starts at a lower level, Hocking dives right in. He assumes that you understand what classes and objects and methods and functions and variables and fields and properties are. All of that stuff is presumed that the reader knows when they bring in. So this is not a beginner text for programming. If you are trying to learn C Sharp and Unity at the same time, consider stopping. Go back to my Coaching Yourself to Code in 2025 video from a couple of weeks ago and listen closely to the intervention cycle that I map out. You need to figure out the sustainable practice. You need to figure out what are my free resources to learn from, and then what is my extended learning process going to look like. And if at any point you're saying, I'm trying to learn two things at once, I think you're in for a rough ride. So I would say go back. But if you have gotten down the fundamentals of C Sharp and you're getting comfortable with classes and objects, stuff like that, you're okay with methods, you're comfortable with variables, then you're probably at a point where you could start to utilize this book. If you're comfortable with all of those, then hell yeah, dive right in. So this is broken up into a series of projects that he walks you through. It's kind of a curated text-based tutorial. The beginning is getting to know Unity, which I actually found pretty interesting, the history of Unity. And then you build a demo that puts you into 3D space, which I believe is a first person. Yeah, it's a first person game where you walk around and you code a very simple ray casting enemy that chases you or scans around and chases you. And then you start building enemies to add projectiles into your game. So in that case, that's extending on that one. So the first one, just the first person controller. Third chapter is all about adding in that shooting via raycast and then allowing the enemy to raycast to find you. The fourth one is on adding more stuff to that. So you start by creating some basic custom models. He kind of gives a very little overview of Blender. And then you build a memory game. And the memory game project was actually paid off because my daughter likes to play it. And I built it with a little sub menu so you can flip between different card sets. That was where things started to click for me. Everything else felt very walled garden-ish, where I was learning and doing, but I wasn't doing it on my own. But by the time that I got to the memory game, I had gotten enough practice that I felt comfortable starting to go out on my own. And then we started using things like arrays to lay out objects, and I was like, okay, now I'm seeing the C# connecting here. And then scooting forward, you make a platformer, you put a GUI onto the game, and then you start by creating a third-person 3D game, which has a little bit of information about animation in it as well. That's where I left off in this particular book. It's about, I left off at about 200 and change in. And largely it's because I was having enough fun that I really wanted to work through another version of this to make sure that what I was doing here was solid. So I've read about 3/4 of this book. And where I kind of dropped off is where he starts to talk about netcode to download or to start to do multiplayer stuff. I read about background music and playing audio. That stuff I jumped forward to read about. And I just netcode just confuses me at this point. It's not something I've dedicated any time to. There's a little bit on it here about like adding billboards and stuff like that. And I just was like, okay. The last couple chapters, one is putting everything together and building a complete game by repurposing everything else that you had done before, which I appreciate. It cannibalizes its previous stuff to make sure you get everything twice. And then the final chapter is on deployment, which I'm nowhere near deployment of anything, so I just didn't read that. So actually, I've probably read about 85% of this book now that I think more about it. It's very well written. It's not as funny as the Player's Guide, but he does crack some jokes. It's not super technical, but I did have to get used to reading the Unity scripting API to make sense of some of the concepts in here where either I just didn't grok what he was saying or he presumed a little bit more background knowledge than maybe I should have had at that time. But overall, if you're looking for a self-paced, text-based walk through building increasingly complex projects with very thorough explanations and demonstrations, Unity in Action is a good read. And it shows up once in a while on Humble Bundle too, as one of those texts. But the thing that I like about Manning in particular, and I've got a couple of their books, is that free PDF that comes with the purchase of one of their books. I really appreciate that about the publisher. Again, I'm not sponsored by any of these books that I've reviewed. I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in showing off some of the resources that I've learned with to hopefully help other people learn. So with that said, if you are learning Unity and you don't want to do something like a video tutorial because you're not that kind of learner, you know, as one would know if they followed my coding diary, I lean pretty heavily on the GameDev.tv video courses. That has its own complications because I have to watch what he's doing on the screen. The screen I'm watching on has to be big enough for me to make sense of some of the coding details. And it's constantly like a management of pausing on this screen or pausing on this computer and then playing on this one, playing on that one. If you just want a calmer, self-paced tutorial to study Unity and to get yourself up and running, Unity in Action is a great option that's cost effective if you buy a used copy of this. It's not even that expensive new, but I just prefer that people don't spend their money if they don't have to. So, all right, with that said, I like Unity in Action. I'm going to finish it once I'm ready to deploy something. I'm probably going to work through, actually, I'm thinking that the final Build Your RPG is going to be a project that I do once I finish the GameDev.tv beginner course. Depending on the placement of this video and the calendar, that might already have happened. I might be back to working on this book by then. But absolutely worth the 20-ish bucks that I paid used for it. And I got a free PDF copy from Manning because the code hadn't been redeemed. So, yeah, I'm going to get out of here. Go build something cool in whatever this year is you happen to be watching it. And remember, coding doesn't have to be intimidating. It can be fun. Really, any kind of professional process that you want to work through can be made fun if you just break it into a cycle of self-growth. That's it. I'm Coach T, and I will see you in the next one.